Have you ever claimed that faith alone in Christ alone is all you need? Well, today we're dissecting this belief to show why faith alone isn't proof that Christianity is true. So join us as we debunk the myth that mere belief is equivalent to reality. What do we actually find when we look beyond faith? Welcome back to Answers from Genesis. I'm Genesis, and I once thought that faith could explain everything.
And I'm Alan, and I also felt the same exact way.
Alan, thinking back, was there anything more intoxicating than our devotion to God?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it was all-consuming.
Now, today we continue peeling back the layers of Christianity in our series, Addicted to God, inspired by Alan's upcoming book. Now, your thoughts and comments are crucial, so let us know what you think.
All right, and remember, we only have 30 minutes to unpack today's myths and misconceptions, so we're going to move right along here.
All right, ready to start that timer and dive in, Alan?
Do it. Let's unravel these.
All right. So let's start with a well-known verse probably every Christian has memorized, Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. Do you remember it?
Of course, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, lest anyone should boast.
Not by works, lest anyone should boast. Yep. All right. So let's talk about grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. What do these things have to do with this section and where we're at in undoing our brainwashing and our addiction, Alan?
All right. So in this section, we're going to discover, primarily focusing on the faith part of the trifecta of grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. The faith aspect is a very important aspect for today. We'll hone in on grace a little later, and we'll hone in on Christ as well a little later. But the faith section is absolutely crucial because one of the things that we learn from this from Ephesians 2:8-9 and Hebrews at chapter 11 verse 1 about the nature of faith is that it's completely and utterly supposed to be without works, driven by grace or founded on grace, and there's nothing that can contribute to making a person believe other than the grace of God. So faith is supposed to be something that is not contingent on works to help you trust God. It is completely an isolated idea. One of the problems that I discovered not too long ago as I was thinking through all of these ideas and these elements of what is it that traps us in Christianity is the whole nonsense of upholding a belief in God based on faith alone, and then trying to add support to that through things like evidence, like apologetics, trying to prove that God exists. It really is nonsensical if you think about it, because if faith alone, let me portray it like this. When I was younger and I was in the church growing up, one of the acronyms that we were taught for faith is forsaking all, I trust him. Right? That was an acronym, FAITH, forsaking all, I trust him. And it was a beautiful acronym because it really does embody the concept of faith alone. But if you think about it, forsaking all, I trust. Okay, well, listen, all forsaking all so I forsake works. Works does not get me there. Neither does proof or evidence or anything empirical. None of that is supposed to assist my faith, because grace alone is supposed to be what produces my faith. And of course, grace's acronym that I learned growing up was God's riches at Christ's expense. So God did everything. He sent Jesus, put the whole thing together, sends his Holy Spirit, awakens faith in us, faith alone, without anything else whatsoever is why I am saved and get to spend eternity with God. So this whole thing started to baffle me. I started to realize, I'm like, why do Christians feel the need to add to faith this idea of evidence or proof? Why are apologists spending all this time trying to find proof for God when the whole system is based on faith alone? And it really doesn't add up. You're actually shooting yourself in the foot because you're claiming it's faith alone, and then you're turning around and producing evidence for something that's contrary to faith alone. Anyway, that's my opening. Go ahead if you have any other thoughts to add to that.
My first thought is that I'm sitting back in Lift Church listening to Alan giving preaching again. You sound just like you do when you preach. All right, for anyone who hasn't heard Alan preach, that's exactly how he sounds. Am I wrong?
No, I guess you're not. No, that's so funny. Well, thank you for this outlet then, because it brings me back to what I want. That's wonderful.
All right. So I'm sorry, but I'm just sitting here like, am I listening to a sermon again?
I love it. That's really funny.
Okay. So this is your anti-sermon, that faith alone, that what Christians claim as faith alone is not really faith alone. So, so works is a big thing that, people talk about, do we add works to it or not, and then of course this passage with grace and all of this. You have something that you said in your book here, that grace alone awakens faith. Tell me what you mean by that.
Evidence, proof, empiricism, logic, none of that awakens faith. Because faith is something that is in a supernatural, unseen realm. So there's nothing empirical that can actually validate or awaken somebody to believe that. That's kind of been made evident, for centuries now. People have been trying to prove the supernatural and have fallen short consistently. And we'll talk more about that when we get to our chapter on apologetics. But so the only thing that can actually awaken this idea of faith in the supernatural realm is grace. The idea that God himself puts that faith in you and says, hey, you can now believe something that you have no other reason to believe. There's no grounds for it. There's no substance for it. You couldn't earn it. I've just done it for you. Ta-da! And now we believe. And that's the idea of grace through faith. So faith, there's kind of, and let me just bring some clarity here up front. And we may have already talked about this. I can't recall, but I just want to bring clarity here in this video, because what a lot of Christians will say is, well, but you have faith too. You have faith in science. Well, no, okay, it's not the same thing. There are actually two layers of faith, if you will. The first layer of faith, which is better known as confidence, but if you want to call it faith, but it's confidence or belief in something. You got to have something that you believe will be a good method for you to determine truth from. So I believe that science is a good method because empirically it can be tested by you, by me, by anybody else that's watching here, by millions of people. Anybody, anywhere can test anything that I propose through the empirical scientific method. And if I can prove it through that method, then there's zero reason to discount it. If I can't, then we should discount it. And that's the way science works. So yes, I believe, or I have a confidence in science. The other version of faith is the second layer. It's the layer that says it is the method in and of itself. Faith is itself the confidence, the assurance, the validity, the proof of the supernatural realm or whatever. So when we talked a few weeks ago at the very beginning of our discussions, I used the term faith in faith. This is a little bit more clarity on what I meant by that, because by faith in faith, so I have faith in science, the scientific method. Christians have faith in faith as the method to trust something that you can't prove any other way except that you claim it was awakened by the grace of God. So I have no problem with saying all people everywhere have that initial first layer of faith. Again, I prefer the word confidence because it's just clearer and it doesn't add to the confusion. So in my book, I've chosen to clarify that and say from now on, when I use the word faith, I mean that second layer, because there's no point in clarifying it every time. So even for the video's sake, I'll use the word confidence for the first layer of faith, and faith for the layer of faith that we're contrasting it with, versus science, the methods. So Hebrews 11 defines faith as the confidence and assurance of what we do not see, or the exact verse. Let me see if I can find it here. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Right, that is one translation. There's another translation. Now, faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. That's the NIV. Then there's the ESV, English Standard Version, which is, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The KJV is, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The point is, all of these words are bounced around in different translations in both parts of that verse, as if they're all synonymous terms. It's as if the translators didn't care which one they used to translate these two words. They seem to think that all of these words are just kind of interchangeable. So you can literally take the words confidence, assurance, conviction, substance, and evidence, and you can quite literally substitute it for either side of that verse in any one of them. So you could put all of them in the same order. You could say, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the assurance of things not seen. You might say, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the substance of things not seen. You might say, now faith is the conviction of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Or you might say, now faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Point being that if all those things mean the same as I'm suggesting that first layer means, conviction, confidence, right? That kind of idea, combined with the second layer that I speak of would be evidence, things that bring the conviction, that prove it empirically. Christianity kind of convolutes it all and says, oh, I have conviction in conviction. I have conviction in my faith as the evidence. Faith now becomes the evidence, according to Hebrews. It's not a thing that you need outside support for. It is itself the evidence. It is itself the conviction, the proof, the assurance, the substance. So this idea of faith alone in Christianity, as defined by Hebrews and Paul throughout his letters, if you try to bring in anything else, it is not only contrary to the concept of grace alone bringing faith about, but it's also contradicting the whole idea that faith alone is supposed to be the evidence. So the system of method, the methodological system of Christianity is, I have confidence in my method, which is called faith alone. That is all I need to believe the supernatural. When I start bringing in other things in, I am now ascertaining the idea of works, righteousness, the way the Bible uses works. Anything that adds to faith alone. This is a big problem for Christianity, especially apologists who continue to try to provide evidence. And the only reason they do that is because they know there's something awry here. That method, called faith, really doesn't make sense. So they're trying to now bring science into the Christian realm and add empirical evidence to faith, and it just doesn't mix. It's like oil and water.
Okay, thank you for that sermon.
There's so much to unpack in this chapter. I'm sorry.
I know it is. That's okay. So what I'm thinking about at this point is how often, and you tell me if you've had this experience too, but how often I've been told after I left Christianity that I just need more faith, right? And so now if you're saying that grace, the grace from God, is the one who gives us this gift of faith, then I guess I want to know two things. Did God stop giving me that gift and I lost my faith, right? Or um, did is God gonna give me more faith? I mean, how do I need if I need more faith, right? How am I going to get that more faith as an atheist? Because that's not what do you hear that from people, from Christians? People will often tell me, you just need more faith. I just need more faith, right? So is God giving me that faith or not? What happened to that faith that I had? Because I think I had a lot of faith. I had a ton of faith, right? I would teach about the mustard seed thing like a lot, and I had more faith in that mustard seed. So what happens to people like us that we had the faith, and if it came from God, then what happened to it? Did he take it away?
Yeah, and that is a really good question. In fact, something I deal with later in the book as well, to show the harshness, the lack of kindness that God has towards people, to deceive them to that degree where they think they have faith and then he just snatches it away. That is a horrible thing. Like, what father would pick 8 children, have 8 children, and be like, all right, 7 of you I'm going to really give faith to. The other one I'm just going to trick. And he's got to figure it out on his own. And at the end of the day, we're all just going to mock him and be like, ha ha, Bruce Reed, I do break after all. Right? It's just like, it is a horrible thing to do to somebody, especially if you are all powerful as God is supposed to be and has the ability to not let people get deceived. And yet, when it comes down to it, God's all powerful. He's the one who gives you faith. He's the one who does it all. Except when you don't have it anymore and you leave, now it's your fault. Free will. God, you took over. You're more powerful than God in that moment. Wait, I thought God was in control. Well, yeah, he was until you decided not to believe. But I thought he's the one who makes me believe. Well, yeah. Yeah. Until you don't. It's nonsensical. It is completely circular. And anything not blame God is the issue. We'll just come up with anything to make sure we take responsibility, and God never takes blame for anything. You know, one of the things that you'll find, and I've listened, like, since I've been an atheist and writing this book, I have listened to more debates between atheists and Christians than anybody should have to endure in their lifetime. Oh my God, I have spent so much, and it's gotten me to a point where I realize that the one common element that they all have is the Christians will present all of the supposed evidence that they have, which, by the way, apologists are actually trying to come up with new arguments. Look, if we could prove God exists, you wouldn't need 50 arguments. You would just need one.
Exactly.
Try to find what's why, because we already believe God exists. All we're trying to do is undergird it, prove it to ourselves, because Christians know that it's something weird here. So we're just trying to find more elements to make ourselves feel better about it. But be that as it may, we'll talk about that later. But in every one of these debates, what ends up happening is the Christian presents all of his arguments or her arguments down to the very, very end where the atheist basically says, okay, all of that sounds really wonderful, but none of it proves you're God. It just proves that something did this. But it takes a complete illogical leap to get to God. Like, and then the response is, oh, well, you just have to have faith. You just need to have faith. Wait, so you just wasted an hour of my time listening to your freaking arguments for the existence of God, only to get to the end and say, oh, well, none of that matters anyway. You just have to have faith. Are you serious now? It's frustrating as all get up, because evidence can't prove God and never has been able to. At the end of the day, it literally comes down to faith. Christians would be better off, apologists would be better off just saying, hey, we don't need arguments. Faith alone. And that's it. And just stand on that. At least you wouldn't look stupid at the end of your argument saying, oh, well, you need faith too. Well, if I need faith too, then I didn't need the evidence. But if I have the evidence, then I don't need faith.
I have several Christians on my Facebook. I don't unfriend anybody just because of what they believe. But, a lot of people have left on their own. But there are several Christians who have stayed on my Facebook so that they can argue with me every day, I think. And what ends up happening, is that, it's good, iron sharpens iron type of thing, right? And it helps me to understand, especially at the beginning when I first left Christianity. I wanted to make sure I'd done the right thing, that I hadn't missed anything, right? And but what ends up happening with all of these Christians who stick around for the conversation is that after we've had whatever it is that we are discussing. If I push and I push and I push, it always, always, always boils down to faith. If I can get them to the end of that conversation, then they will see that the only answer they have is faith. And so at least I'll give credit to the ones who are honest that that is the only thing that they have. But Alan, is that such a bad thing, really? What do you think? Is it a bad thing to just live your life on faith?
I mean, no, not if you don't mind spending the rest of your life in an insane asylum discussing your friend with powers. I mean, if that's the way you want to live, great. But do you really want to live like that? I mean, believing in Santa for the rest of your life, like, it's odd. It's odd. And look, I get it. When you're brainwashed, I get why you think that it's a real method and that it's wonderful. That I do get, because I was there, you were there. There would be zero reason once the brainwashing is removed to ever go back to that and say, I miss my invisible friend. I miss the conversations I had with others about my invisible friend with superpowers, which, by the way, my invisible friend with superpowers was different than your invisible friend with superpowers. As we've seen already, everybody basically creates their own God and how they want him to be, not what the Bible teaches, because the Bible isn't even clear. There's so many denominations, so many different views. Every individual within the denominations have their own views. So when you're sitting around worshiping and discussing your God, there's nothing objective about it. It's my invisible friend with his superpowers versus your invisible friend with his superpowers, and we just sit around and discuss them and worship. It's embarrassing, actually, that I did that for so many years. I actually can't believe 42 years of my life I did this. Like I just picture myself sometimes sitting around and I see these movies in a sales sign with drool coming out of my mouth and be like, my invisible friend has powers. Like I can't. I was the biggest idiot of all. It's very sad because that's what the brainwashing does, and it's not because we're stupid inherently. There's nobody who is stupid inherently. I don't believe any Christian out there is just too dumb, and they like an invisible. That's not the problem. The problem is you've been brainwashed to think this is true. You've been brainwashed to think there's something called grace that comes from God that establishes this method called faith. That faith alone is all you need to believe in God. And then as a result of that, you end up having experiences, and those experiences you call the Holy Spirit because that's what you've been taught to believe it is. And the whole thing's just cyclical, and you can't break out of it because you're so inundated with all that, with that mind virus, that you can't see it any other way. But I think that's why apologists have started bringing arguments to the table, because they see that it's ludicrous and it makes no sense, but they're so brainwashed, they've got to find something that makes this real, because it's not real, and they want it to be real so bad. They want it to look like it's more than just flying my unicorn around space last night. It's got to sound better than that, because we all know that's ridiculous. But God, that's not ridiculous, and we're going to prove to you why. We're going to find 50 different reasons why that's true, even though none of them get anywhere except, at the end you just have to have faith.
So let's talk about one of those, and this is one I get a lot, and I have just a little bit of a personal connection to this one, so I always like talking about it. And that's the chair analogy. So you just have to have faith don't you have faith that the chair is going to hold you up? So I don't know if this is where it started or not, but my uncle he worked at Moody Bible Institute for a while, and he developed a whole series of Christian Science videos. And probably many of the people here have watched them. So the Moody Bible Science video collection or something. And one of his videos was on this, was the analogy of this chair. So you have faith when you look at a chair. You probably don't even think about it, but you have faith that it's going to hold you up when you sit down. Alan, tell us why that analogy just falls flat. Basically, it doesn't hold up the argument for faith.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. I was lost for a second. So going back to what I said at the beginning, that there is a confidence in faith versus confidence in science or empirical methods. A chair can be tested empirically. You can sit in it, You can observe it. You can test it over and over again. You can have 50 people sit in the same chair and it's proven over and over and over again. Sure, chairs break occasionally, but it's the exception to the rule. And that never sways the confidence of anybody who has tested a chair empirically. Everybody sits, I'm sitting in a chair right now. You're sitting in a chair right now. My guess is the majority of people listening to this show right now are sitting in a chair and never thought twice about it because they're absolutely confident in the empirical method of science that says chairs don't break when you sit on them. They're supposed to support you. And that's why we do it. That's why people still fly in planes. Even if a plane crashes, a bunch of idiots get on the next plane. Why? Because they're not actually idiots, because they know it's empirically proven that planes rarely crash. It's actually one of the safest ways to travel. So you can test it empirically. You don't need faith for that. Having confidence and faith doesn't do anything for the chair analogy whatsoever. John Piper, who was my favorite, I guess, author, preacher, theologian when I was a Christian, he actually recognized this because I remember I was at a conference one time where R.C. Sproul was talking about this analogy for faith in a chair and saying that if you want to be a Christian, you have to have faith in a chair in the same way. And he used all the Latin terms and, talking about believing it's true and then trusting it is and then sitting in it and whatever, the whole 9 yards. And he said, and that's how you become a Christian. You trust the chair and you sit in it. And Piper got up there and he said, actually, that's not really what faith is, because that's all something you can see in the natural realm. He said, that's all something that doesn't require grace. And he went on to show, he said, genuine faith for a Christian is you don't just sit in the chair, you love the chair, you cherish the chair, you live for the chair. That's the difference between the two. Faith believes that there's something about the chair that's so supernatural it's worth worshiping, whereas natural science just proves that the chair is real and can be sat in. So the Christian take, that's where genuine faith comes in, that's awakened by faith, is that only God can do that. You have to love it and cherish it, something that is so wonderful to you, you can't live without it. Totally different.
Yeah, it is. And I would take that one step farther, and I would say that Christians must have faith in an imaginary chair.
Well, and that's correct. Right.
An invisible chair, right? One that they cannot see.
Correct.
That would really, really, really measure how much faith you have, that you are willing to sit down in a chair that you cannot see.
And that is true. And the problem, though, Jen, is that so the apologetic methods, anybody that is using empirical method to dissect it and discuss the apologetic, they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, none of that actually proves anything you're trying to make it prove, right? So that's why at the end of the day, the apologist has to say, well, you just need to have faith. But the Christian is already convinced that God exists. So they look at all this supposed empirical evidence for God, and they say, oh, look at all this proof, the cosmological argument, the evidential argument, the presuppositional, look at them, all of them, they support that God exists. It's so powerful, it's so true, you can't deny it. Look at that, look how much it proves that God. So they actually believe, because they're brainwashed to think that it actually crosses that leap of faith, they think they're actually looking at a real chair. So,
yes, but I would really, really like to see a Christian in real life show me that level of faith in a chair that they cannot see.
Right. Well, you can't. And you're absolutely right, you can't. It's just because you're so... Look, you and I lived there. We believed that all of this... All I had to do at one point when I was a Christian is go outside, grab a blade of grass and be like, look, see, proof that God exists. Like that was the level of brainwashing. I was convinced of this. It had to be a creator because I started with that presupposition. So there was no other alternative. So yes, God exists. Look at all this proof. So I really believed I had a substance like a chair. I really paralleled it in my mind because I really thought it was just as real. So I had to take that level of faith and said, now I love it and cherish it. But yes, when you finally step out of that matrix of Christianity, you finally realize, yeah, none of this proves anything about God. In fact, I don't have a single reason to believe in God. And this whole thing of faith, that there's not even a grace that's awakening that was something my mom was tricked into thinking I had. And so yeah, that is why I'm on this quest to free people, because I don't want to see people live in their insane asylums every week anymore. I want to get people out so they can live the rest of their lives in the real world, because you only get this one life. This is it. This is what we get. Whether you like it or not, it's reality. You come to grips.
Alexa off. And just like with any addiction that you need to quit, once the brainwashing has been removed, you pick a time and you stop. But don't leave just yet. This was supposed to be Ellen's line.
Oh, sorry. New thing. Hang on. I'm going to find it. But don't leave just yet. Oh, you said that already. Subscribe, like, and drop a comment here. And if you want to join our fast-growing community of ex-Christians on Facebook, click on the link in the description below. Back to you, Jen.
Okay. And if you enjoyed this week's discussion, you might want to leave a tip in the tip jar. Join us next week as we continue to peel back the years of brainwashing. Until next time, break your God addiction with answers from Genesis.